Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm really glad you're here. If you enjoy fun content and cool videos, you're in the right place. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Let's jump right in. For a number of years, I was a camp counselor at an overnight camp in the Muskokas. I loved it more than any job I've ever had, despite the non-existent pay, annoying campers, long days and short nights, crappy food, etc. For one, I got to tell as many scary stories as I could sputter out. There was nothing better than hanging around a dying campfire with a bunch of junior high kids who were demanding the scariest, most blood-curdling tales I knew. And I told them all: the babysitter and the eerie clown statue, the driver and the creepy gas attendant, the woman and her licking dog. I saved my best stories for the overnight trips we made in Algonquin Park. For non-Canadians, it's a massive park in the middle of Ontario, spanning nearly 8,000 square kilometers, when days would be spent canoeing on pristine lakes and nights would be spent around the fire, singing and making s'mores and being as rowdy as the only people within miles could be. Once the kids had quieted down, I told them stories of a stalker in the woods with a face so horrifying it paralyzed all of its victims in fear, or the group of campers who decided to spend a night across the lake from an abandoned, or was it, insane asylum. On this particular night, I'd finished up the tales, once again insisting that they were entirely true, and sent the campers to their tents. It had been an exhausting day, and none of the 6 kids were in any mood to stay up later. My fellow counselor had also decided to pack it in, leaving just me on a fallen log next to the dying fire. I took a deep breath of the cool, fresh, pine-scented air and looked out at the lake. The partial moon reflected off the glassy water, and on the other side I could see towering cliffs going up several hundred feet. I considered whether we could canoe over, climb up a few dozen feet, and do some cliff jumping. I grinned. The camp director would have my head if we did that. If he found out, movement at the very top of the cliffs caught my eye. There was a small light bobbing along the peak. At first I thought it was a star, but it was larger and gave off a golden glow. It slowly moved back and forth in a small arc. As I sat up and watched it, another appeared next to it, bobbing along the top of the cliff. Then another, and a few more. My stomach dropped into my feet. I grabbed my bag and pulled my digital camera out, then focused it on the little glowing orbs and used the zoom function. I counted them, and then I counted again. Oh shit. In a flash, I was up and running to the tents. Hey guys, wake up. We gotta go. There was movement in the tents, and then I had 7 confused heads looking out at me. My co-counselor wore a mixture of concern and pure anger. I hate to do this, I continued, but the clouds are looking really threatening. There's a big rainstorm coming in. If we get caught in it, it's going to ruin our trip. Seriously? Laura, my co-counselor, asked. We're in the middle of the woods. Where would we go? I pulled a map and flashlight out of my bag. There's a ranger station a few kilometers south of us. I traced the path with my finger. Thank God. We can make it there in a few hours. The campers groaned. Can't we just go in the morning? No. I shouted, my voice echoing across the lake. I lowered it. Come on, let's get packed up and go. I'll tell you a story along the way. I smiled, though I could feel my lips quivering. It's my best one. That seemed to get them going, and within 10 minutes the tents were packed up and we'd begun our trek into the deep woods, with small flashlights our only guide. When I was confident we were moving at a steady pace, I allowed myself to relax and began to tell my favorite campfire story. Centuries before the European settlers made their way into the country, it was inhabited by the First Nations people. They had made the trip from across western Canada, following the migration patterns of large animals such as buffalo and bison. Eventually they reached Ontario, at which point they split off into smaller groups of travelers, each searching for a section of land to call their own. Legend has it that one group, consisting of about 20 men, women, and children, had ventured through this very area in search of a place to call home. Though it wasn't even the end of October, the weather had made a turn for the worse, and as the group journeyed around the lake, a fierce blizzard hit. Within an hour, the group found themselves in blinding snow and below zero temperatures. The clothes they had on them were made for the fall. Not this sort of weather, and there weren't any Canada Goose jackets around back then. But they pressed on. They didn't have any other choice. Night was falling as they reached a cliff bluff which towered over a cold, choppy lake. There was no stopping for this group. They'd die if they didn't make it past the cliffs. But with darkness setting in and the snow falling even harder, visibility was almost non-existent. So one of the elders had an idea. Using the little kerosene they had left, he lit a lantern for each of the travelers and had them carry it in front of them, not so that they could see the cliffs, but so they could see who was in front of them, allowing them to all follow each other across the narrow bluffs. With the strongest of the men leading the way, the group began to cross the cliffs. The freezing, wet snow soaked every bone in their body. The harsh wind chilled any exposed skin and threatened to push them right off the rock. Their path was no more than a few feet wide, and would have been slippery to even the best of hiking boots, let alone hand-fashioned moccasins. Slowly, painstakingly slowly, they made their way up the cliffs, praying that whatever lay on the other side could shelter them from the intensifying storm. They were about halfway up, hundreds of feet above the lake, though it was well out of their vision. In fact, all they could see in this blinding storm was the lantern in front of them, acting as a beacon to guide their steps. If the light moved up, they moved up. If it went down, they moved down. Each of the travelers was almost in a trance, caring about nothing but the glowing orb a few feet away. For the leader, though, there was no such luxury. He moved forward blindly, feeling along the cliff with his free arm, though his skin was so numb he could barely feel anything. As the path wound back again, he made a misstep and lost his footing, just as a gust of wind blasted his back. He desperately grasped for the hold, but his frozen fingers couldn't get anything. With a terrified scream, he slipped off the cliffs and fell into the icy black lake. The rest of the party didn't see him fall, of course. All they saw was his glowing orb dropping away from the bluff and disappearing in the darkness. There was no time to mourn. They continued on, but the storm was worsening. After another minute, one of the children, his body unable to withstand the cold, dropped away, his lantern glowing until the choppy waters put it out. Another, having seen this, lost his balance and fell. This pattern went on until there were just 5 people left, fumbling along in the darkness, following the light in front. As hard as they tried, the cliffs were unforgiving. The remaining men fell down to 4, then 3 and 2, and then there was just one left who legend says cursed the earth as his legs slipped and he plunged hundreds of feet down, his lantern the last one to be extinguished. Of the 20 members who tried to overcome the cliffs, I finished. Not one of them survived. They say that sometimes when the conditions are right, you can see the orbs along the cliff, symbols of the lost travelers who will never find their homes. As the story ended, leaving the campers in an eerie silence, I saw lights up ahead. A wave of relief poured over me. We picked up the pace and found the ranger's station bursting with activity, with a half-dozen people running around, loading up trucks and shouting into radios. The wind was beginning to really pick up, and I heard thunder in the distance. "Hey, you kids!" A large burly man with a full beard and mustache ran up to us. "Get in the trucks." "We don't have much time." Laura and I led the kids to one of the pickup trucks. "What's going on?" I asked the man. "Didn't you hear? Another gust of wind. Huge storm systems heading right for us. Already been tornadoes touched down. We're getting everyone out of here. Let's go." We all climbed into the truck's bed. I collapsed down, feeling like I'd just been punched in the gut. The ranger climbed into the front and we took off down a makeshift road. My head was spinning. It wasn't possible. How? Laura slid next to me, keeping her voice low. "How did you know we had to get out of there?" I looked over at her. My face felt empty of any blood. "I saw the lights." "What? No." She gasped, then caught herself. "How many?" I took a deep breath. 8. She looked around at all the campers who were now lying against each other, asleep despite the bumpy road. "That's all of us, my God." I nodded and leaned against her. Laura had heard the traveler's story before, and she knew that I'd left out a key bit of information. The lights were real, but they were never random. If they were shining, bobbing back and forth, swinging in a small arc, it was because they had a message. A warning. One light would shine for each person who was about to die. As with many of the people that post here, I come because very few of my friends believe my story. And similarly to many of the posts here, it does contain suggestions of the paranormal. However, where it differs is that no matter how hard I Try to think of a plausible explanation for how this happened. Nothing tangible can explain the paralyzing peril I felt that night. I will begin, perhaps obviously, at the start. I am currently spending a year of my life teaching in Japan. I was able to enjoy some of Japan's wild landscapes during the later summer months of my arrival. Yet with the long winter we experience here, when spring came around, I was itching to see as much of it as possible. Thus the plan to hitchhike from my home just south of Kanazawa to Miyajima, a famously spiritual island just off the coast of Hiroshima, and back again began to unfold. I must add before I go any further that, although I remain open to the concept of spirituality, I have never before had reason to believe in demons or ghosts. Japan is the land of the spirit and the soul, and offerings to those that have departed this world can be found in every single place you look. However, these two I just believe to be rituals buried deep within their ancient culture. Aside from the few days me and some friends spent exploring Miyajima, I spent my time alone. My only conversations were with the abundance of locals I met who were politely inquisitive as to what I had in my hiking bag, and the raccoons that I would less politely tell to fuck off when they woke me up in the middle of the night. Some of these nights were filled with the sounds of the city, an exchange made in my favor as I was then greeted by the dawning sun rising to highlight whatever historical monument I'd pitched my tent in front of. However, most of my nights were spent far away from the sounds of men and children. The blissful sounds of nature led me into my dreams. It is on one of these nights that my story takes place. It was nearing the end of my journey, and as such I had ticked most of the places off my list of things to do, so I asked my mom to choose my next destination, and I woke up to very clear instructions on how to get to a secluded waterfall called Mino Falls. I know it is customary on this page to not reveal the location where these stories take place, and I hope my story is not removed due to my mentioning of it, but I tell this as a warning. Do not camp here. I checked the weather forecast for the area, showers it said. Some people feel the rain, others just get wet. A quote by the great Bob Marley that I repeated to myself as rain lightly patted the windows. By this point in my journey I had given up trying to hitchhike. I was able to see much more by taking the inexpensive local train, and so it was on one of these many local trains I was sat, ready to just get wet. It was a good 50-minute walk away, from the small town of Mino through a beautiful forest in the gorge created by the waterfall. On sunnier days I am told it is an extremely popular place for tourists and locals alike. However, on this particular day I was greeted by few people. As with most of my walks along this journey, I took the less trodden path and wound my way up the side of this gorge further into thickness of the trees. The rain was quieter here, more muffled. The gray sky barely made it through the canopy, but there was plenty of residual light. I passed a small shrine on my left and smiled at the small cup of coffee placed on its mantel. My first reaction to seeing cups of coffee and bottles of water on shrines is always that of surprise. If you've ever been to Japan, you will notice a very immaculate landscape, void of any litter or bins. The phenomenon of placing cheap vending machine coffee on shrines, I was told, stems from the thought that the spirits are tired, and Japan, being the highly caffeinated province it is, happily aids their weary guests. I inspected the shrine more closely. It didn't appear to be made out of stone, nor was there any head remaining. I shrugged it off as a product of time and made my way further down the path. The trees opened up slightly and the dappled light reflected at me from the damp trunks. The world was sodden and I really hoped that this waterfall had some sort of shelter for me to sleep under. Only 10 minutes past the previous shrine did I find another. An almost identical headless figure sat bow-legged with its hands by its sides. Less forest growth covered this one. Less time had taken its toll, but it remained firmly headless. I decided to leave an offering of my own, something I had never done before, but felt inclined to after my week of passing many a shrine, without offering something in recognition. I had 2 plastic bottles, one empty and the other more than half full. I couldn't afford to leave all of my water, so I emptied some into the now filling bottle and left it by the shrine with its lid off. As I walked away, I toyed with the idea that this bottle would fill up every time it rained and the spirit would be happy. I had done a good deed today. I arrived at the waterfall just after lunch, and as I'd hoped, There was a large sheltered area which I scouted and deduced would be the best spot to pitch my tent for the night. The rain had turned the waterfall from what I would imagine is usually more of an attractive stream into a tremendous torrent of falling water. The 15-meter-high fall then ran its way back down a fairly magical-looking gorge and around a corner. I spent the afternoon reading, drinking whiskey, and trying not to get my camera wet. I didn't want to pitch my tent until evening lest the park rangers see me and tell me to pack up. Yet, as late as I waited, the evening patrol inevitably came past as I was finishing the construction of my anti-spider dome. Tento dame, accompanied with the bilingual gesture of making an X with one's arms, translates to something like, "Kind sir, this is a nature reserve and you can't pitch your tent here, so please pack it up and move." I nodded politely and feigned the start of my deconstruction. I regretted many times over the course of this night that I did not listen to the kind old man, that I did not heed his warning, that I probably misunderstood what he was trying to tell me, and that I did not ask him why I was not allowed to camp there. My only recompense for pursuing my cause of adventure is that I now have this story to tell. When they left, I began to search the area for somewhere out of the way that I could stay safely hidden from the mean park rangers that wanted me to destroy my home. I wish I could say I found somewhere with an even more beautiful view of the falls, but what I instead decided upon was a very large disabled bathroom. I measured the inside of the room with my paces, and to my bemused delight it was in fact more than enough space for the tent to fit. To my friend that lent me his tent and has yet to hear this story, and perhaps may read it here for the first time, the bathroom was suspiciously clean. I moved my tent into the room under the shade of twilight, and began to hang my dripping clothes over the variety of handles one finds inside disabled toilets. Confident with my decision, and with the remaining light waning, I locked the door and got into my sleeping bag. It was a heavy hook-style latch attached to a heavy metal sliding door, perfectly bear-proof. After a minute, I had successfully deceived the motion sensor in the room and the light went off. I absorbed the darkness and let my ears take control of my mind. Something those of you who have camped alone before will know is that the noise of the world around you becomes tantalizingly sharp once you zip yourself up into your cocoon. The slightest snuffle of a hedgehog must be a bear, and the wind that momentarily shakes your tent must be a person trying to get in. However, my agile-minded brain had taken me safely inside a bathroom and behind a locked door, so I felt unrecognizably secure. Shortly after I zipped myself up, the sounds of the patrol bike began to haunt me. It was hard to tell over the sounds of the waterfall exactly where the car was, so I sat up and braced myself for the inevitable knock, knock, knock on the door, which would require me to pack up my tent in the rain and walk back through the forest at night. For nearly an hour I heard the sounds vehicles moving around. I sat clutching my knees, ears pricked, preparing myself for what I deemed the only possible course of action. When I was finally greeted with the solitary sound of falling water, I released my knees and my breath simultaneously. My heartbeat began to subside and I braved, turning on my head torch so that I could continue my book. I downed the remainder of my whiskey and for a while I let myself escape from the room I was in. At around 11 p.m. I closed my book and surrendered my eyes to the darkness. I allowed my body to find a comfortable place and closed my eyes. The undisputable sounds of children laughing danced past me. Silence followed. My body froze. My skin grew cold. The only way I can describe the fear I felt would be to compare it to the paralyzing fear that comes from nightmares. But I was awake. When I mustered the courage to quietly unzip my sleeping bag, I reached for my phone and messaged my girlfriend and my mom, asking for them to tell me I am awake. I must have sounded crazy, but I needed to be sure. I locked my phone and continued to press my ears to the slightest sound. Unsure as to whether my ears were now creating what I expected to hear, the laughing was fainter a further away. I no longer trusted my ears. I was trapped. If I moved outside of my tent, the motion sensor would trigger and I'd be discoverable by whatever it was I had just heard. So in my tent I stayed. My hands grasped my phone, waiting for some external source to reassure me that I was not in fact dreaming. My rational brain had dissipated at this point. I knew my dream mother would also be able to tell me that I was awake, but I needed something. I heard the lock of bathroom click and swing. I locked my phone and silenced my breath. My mind raced with causes and reasons, and what my crazy mind kept coming back to was this forest. Spirits had led a bear to my home. Unlocking the door was their final task. I couldn't check even if I wanted to. I needed the darkness to hide. I heard the click and swing of the lock again. I don't know how much time passed before I dared unlock my phone again. But the message I needed was there. Both my girlfriend and mother confirmed my fears. I was awake. I quickly explained what was happening to them both. The last update they had previously was that I was hiding in a toilet. They had both found it very funny. Neither of them were laughing now. The logical woman, my mother, has tried to convince me that it was probably some kids getting drunk in their favorite spot away from their parents. Oh, how much I wanted to believe that was true. The distance from the town and the quantity of rain refused my brain to accept that truth. However, it is what I began to focus on. Then I remembered the lock and the impending bear attack. I found my pocket knife and placed it near my head. Did the spirit unlock it and lock it again to tease me? I waited for another eternity. My mother urged me to focus on my breathing. Knock, knock, knock. The dreaded sound from earlier in the night, which I had very gratefully acknowledged would not come, hammered down so much more fear than I had ever anticipated. The peril I experienced not half an hour before was back tenfold. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. Silence. Nothing followed the knocking. The door didn't move. I tuned in on the sounds of the waterfall and focused on my breathing as per my mother's request. My mind's illusion of finding recognizable patterns within the randomness of the noises around me was now overwhelming. The laughing was still indefinable. I begged that it didn't come closer. A single loud knock brought a tear to my eye. Many a horror film I had seen and into the forest I expected to be taken. I shielded myself through closed eyes and clutched my only tangible connection to the outside world to my chest. My body tensed, bracing myself for whatever was about to come next, and like this my night was spent. I packed my tent up with the morning sun and was greeted with a gloriously gray but dry day. I told several people about my story. The Japanese among them were quick to believe, and the foreigners among them were logically skeptical. I didn't know how to explain it very well. In the safety of my real home, hindsight shrouded my previous thoughts, and I began to think of possibly more logical causes for my experience. I have toyed with the idea of monkeys, real children, dreams, and illusions. Yet nothing can explain everything I experienced. The overwhelmingly physical feeling of fear is something I will never forget. When I returned to work the next week, I was showing a colleague some of my photos. Although importantly, I had decided not to tell them the story. When I got to the photo of my tent by Mino Falls, he stopped me and said, "Oh, Mino, English difficult. Many, many ghosts." I couldn't tell him my story, but my skin crawled with the reminder that for the first time in my life, I was in the presence of something I cannot explain. The following morning, I parted my curtains and saw an empty plastic bottle sitting lidless on the sill. I want to start by saying, I am not in this story. I am a detective, and over the years I have come across a lot of stories. What I am about to post now is the best retelling of events I can write. 2 years back, while going through a storage unit, I found a GoPro. Once I had taken it home to watch, I quickly took it into the station after the first 10 minutes. I watched the rest of the video with a few others there. And after watching the video, we all got to work on trying to uncover what it was about. That is why I am here now. Maybe I can get help from someone here. So, here is what was on that video. Time 0:01. The video starts with a view of the ground before getting strapped onto the head of our POV from now on. Mark, how does it look? He asked, looking around at 7 people in the woods around a campfire. Frank, you look stupid. Margaret, Frank, please try your best to be nice. She waved her hands to get everyone's attention. Margaret, now that we are all settled in and the fire is going, how about we all give our names and why we are here? Mark, how about you go first? And we go right from you. She sits down looking at Mark to start. Mark, sure. Hi, I'm Mark. I'm here to meet new people for the most part and become more social. He looks to his right, seeing a man who looks to be in his early 20s. Looks to be around 6 feet tall, blonde, short hair, and muscular. Daniel. Hello everyone, my name is Daniel and I have known Margaret for some time now. I like to help her whenever I can. That is why I am here now. Daniel looks around, smiling at everyone as if he were excited to be there. Right of him was a man that also looked to be in his early to mid-20s. Long black hair, about 5'10" feet tall, and has a patchy beard. Frank. "I'm Frank," he said with his arms crossed, looking into the fire. Mark looks at Margaret and back to Frank. "Margaret. Frank," she said with care. "Frank, I'm here to deal with my anger." He sighs while tapping his boot. To his right, a pale woman, perhaps younger than Daniel. She looked frail, maybe 5'5" in height and a bit on edge. "Emma. I'm Emma, here to move on from the last 2 years." She looked at the ground, not wanting to make eye contact with anyone. Right of her was a large man. He was bald, had a big beard, maybe taller than Daniel, and a scar running from his left eye down to his neck. "Frank. Move on? That's it? I had to say the reason I'm here." He looks around, chuckling. Margaret. "Frank, please, don't push her." Daniel. "Yeah, dude. Be respectful and wait for everyone else to talk." Frank. Of course, he makes a motion to zip his lips. Everyone sighs. Jacob. "Hello, everyone. I'm Jacob, happy to be here, of course. I've been off the alcohol for over a year now, thanks to Margaret, but this is my first time at a camp with a support group." Everyone claps and Frank scoffs. Right of him is a woman in her mid-40s or so. Short black hair, 5'8", maybe 5'9", and both arms filled with tattoos. Mia. "The name's Mia. I am here to work on myself, give more and take less." She slightly shakes her head. Finally, the last person, a young man around the age of Daniel or so, but much shorter. He had to be around 5'6" or so, long, messy, dark hair and no facial hair. Liam. "Hey everyone, I'm Liam Say." Margaret. "No last names." "Haha, I know you're new, but we don't do last names, Liam." "Oh, sorry. I'm Liam. I'm here to, get out of the system and shit. Look for a job, maybe. It seemed like he didn't really know what the group was there for." Margaret. "Great. So that is everyone. Thank you all again for coming here. I'm sure you will all get something from this that will change your life." Mark looks around at everyone, and Margaret suggests everyone talks to each other for a few minutes. Before anyone gets to any conversations, Mark turns the GoPro off. Time, 4:23, the video snaps back on. Chatter quietly dies down as Margaret stands up. Margaret. "I'll be right back." She walks about 10 feet behind from where she was seated to the van they had come here in. Mark. "Anyone got any good scary stories to tell?" He looks around at everyone. Daniel. "Yeah, I got a good one. It's about a group of people that go camping." Frank. Yeah, we all know how this goes. Let me tell a scary fucking story." Daniel sighs and Frank stands up, looking at everyone. Frank begins telling the story as Margaret comes back from the van with flashlights, passing them on to everyone. Daniel moves his chair closer to Margaret and Mark, wanting to talk to them while Frank went on with his story. Daniel. "It's good to see you in better spirits, Margaret. I know it's been a little hard for you after, your husband left you," he says softly, and she nods. Margaret. "Yeah, let's not talk about that right now, yeah?" Daniel nods. Mark, Margaret, and Daniel start to talk to each other while Frank continues his story. After about 2 minutes, Margaret gets everyone's attention. Frank. "Oh, what the hell, I was getting to the best part." Margaret. "That's enough now. I want us all to now go on a scavenger hunt. You all have your flashlights, and I set up flags not too far from here yesterday. You'll all be in pairs of 2. Sorry if you get paired with me, haha." Jacob. "I don't really want to go walking in the woods just when it's already dark." Frank. "Did my story scare you?" Jacob. "No, I don't want to go looking for flags for who knows how long in the dark. I think it sounds fun. I could probably find more than everyone else." Emma. "Yeah, I also don't want to do this." Margaret. "Oh, I should have told you all first. That's on me. But a raise of hands for who does not want to." Everyone but Mark, Mai, and Daniel put their hands up. Mark looks around at everyone as chatter starts to turn into arguing. 3 minutes of them all discussing the activity, what to do instead, and to maybe go to bed in the tents they had set up when they got here. Maybe all of them talking so loudly was the reason they didn't hear it coming. But I think Mark did, as he turned to look behind him a few times and to look in between the others. Then Frank stops talking as he focuses on behind Margaret. The rest of the group slowly hear it too and sees what Frank does. Walking from behind Margaret was 5 people dressed in suits and wore blank white plastic masks. The masks looked cheap, but the suits looked extremely expensive, black with red stripes on the sleeves. Everyone fell silent as Margaret turned around to see the 5 people walk closer to her, passing her car. Now only a few feet away from Margaret, can the shapes of the 5 be fully seen? The one in the middle, tall and imposing, wore his suit jacket around his waist, wearing a white tank top, his arms muscular and full of scars. The other 4 were about 6 feet tall, looking heads and shoulders smaller than the man in the middle. Time 10:12, Frank. What the fuck do you all want, huh? Mark looks at Frank and at the others. I'm sure many thoughts are going through his head. Margaret turns to the group and back to the 5 men. Lives, said the tall man in a deep, muffled voice before taking a machete from behind him, and in one quick, swift swing, Margaret falls to the ground with her head flying from her body. Her head rolls to the fire pit, slowly catching on fire as her body goes limp. A silent horror falls on everyone as they look at each other in disbelief. The masked men don't move at all, just looking. Frank. Fuck! Everyone run with me! He screams. Mark snaps his head around to see Frank running away from everyone else as they start to follow right behind him. Mark takes a few looks back as he runs to catch up with the others back at the 5 men. They remain in the same position, not moving at all. Frank, Daniel, and Mai are the fastest as everyone is now reaching them, with Jacob only catching up after everyone else is already talking about what has just happened. Time 12:45, Frank. What the fuck? Daniel. Just calm down, we must make a plan. Mai. Yeah, keep running in this direction. She points off into the wood as Mark catches his breath. The camera looks at the ground as Jacob can be heard panting heavily. Emma. And what is that way, huh? Frank. The way that's away from those fucks. He nods at Mai. Mai. We have to keep going while we have this much distance on them. Daniel. No, there are others here that need help. He walks over to Liam, Jacob, and Emma. Mark looks at Frank and Mai. Mark. Yeah, we can't just leave them, catching his breath and standing upright. Mai. I am not dying because of some out-of-shape fucks. You with me, Frank? Frank looks at Mai and back to the group. Frank. I fucking hate that I'm about to say this, but we are better with the numbers. Mai says nothing as she runs into the woods with the flashlight she has until she cannot be seen anymore. Mark. From what I was able to see, they aren't following yet, or at least I didn't see them move when we took off. Daniel. Okay, from now on, only one flashlight on at a time and we follow me. Can you 3 walk? He does his best to get Jacob, Liam, and Emma ready to go. Frank. No, we follow me. I'm not taking orders from a goody-goody. Daniel. We do not have the time to argue this. Who wants to follow me? Everyone raises their hands but Frank. Daniel. See, I'm leading. Liam. Just wait. Hold on, this isn't adding up, you know. He stands up and starts pacing. Daniel. Look, we can talk about this late. Liam. No, this is a setup, it has to be. Margaret said something, like this will change our life, and wanted us all to go in groups of 2 into the woods minutes before those crazy people showed up, right? Everyone looks at each other. Daniel. I will not tolerate any slander on Margaret's name. Liam. Yeah, you wouldn't, right? I overheard you talking about her husband leaving her. Why did he do that? Emma. Wait, what? Jacob. I'm good to go now, we should leave. Frank. No, not yet. Frank steps in front of Daniel. So, Liam is bringing up some interesting points, wouldn't you say? Mark. I gotta say, it does sound weird when it's put like that. Daniel. No, what does that even mean? She got her head chopped off, what's the plan? Liam. Suicide and wanted us all dead. Daniel. Why? Why would she want us dead? I've known her for years and she wouldn't do something that messed up. Liam. Explain her weird ass. Words and the timing. The sound of steps can be heard in the distance. Jacob. Wait, you hear that? He moves his flashlight towards Mark. Frank. Dude, come here. Mark rushes over to them and turns his body to see the 5 men walking towards the group from about 20 feet away. The sounds of footsteps on sticks quiet the group. Mark looks at the group and waves his hands to get the others to start running, making sure no one is left behind, and the 5 men keep walking, slowing. The group stops for a moment to catch their breath. Time 17. 8. Loud clap can be heard where the 5 men are following the sounds of sprinting. Quick stomps can now be heard in 5 different directions, then dead silence. Frank. They are fucking with us. Daniel. And they split up. He runs his hands through his hair. Frank. Dude, is that GoPro thing still on? How have you not tossed that thing? Mike. Right. I forgot about it, Daniel. Keep it on, it might be able to get one of their faces, or at least capture what happens to us. Liam. Why do you have that thing anyway? Mark. Oh shit. Everyone looks at Mark at once, I'm sure thinking he is seeing one of the men. Margaret and I had a talk before we came out. She wanted me to bring the GoPro to capture the trip and make a little film over the 2 days. Frank and Liam stare at Daniel. Emma. What the hell? Oh fuck, Liam is right, isn't he? Daniel, say something. He is just staring into the distance. Liam throws his arms into the air and walks around the group when loud metallic chomp can be heard, followed by the screams of Liam. The others rush to him and see he has gotten himself caught by a bear trap. Liam. Fuck, get this fucking thing off me. Everyone tries to pull the trap open, but with no success. Daniel. Come on, everyone. Emma. Shit. She lets go of the trap and falls backward. Mark looks at her, at the trap and back to her. She kicks her legs around, trying to get to her feet as everyone looks at her. Jacob. Yo. Steps can be heard from behind them, and as Mark looks behind Jacob, one of the men dashes in with a knife and slashes at Jacob. He had put his arm up in time to protect his face from the knife. Daniel and Frank both let go of the trap to tackle the man when another man dashes in to dig his knife into Daniel's left leg. Mark watches as Liam is stuck in the trap. Jacob is now bleeding from his arm, and his attacker now moving towards Frank while Daniel pushes the man off him but doesn't pull the knife out. Daniel. Mark. The man that got pushed off Daniel gets up and starts slowing, backing up into the woods as the other man swings his knife at Frank. Mark and Daniel rush at the knife-swinging maniac. Daniel pushes Frank out of the way and tackles the man to the ground. Jacob now coming to had help with Mark to attack the man on the ground. Daniel. He is stabbing me, grab him. Frank rushes in to help the other 2 in the attack. The 3 grab the man's arms and get the knife away from him, while also stomping on him. Daniel. Don't kill him, just hold on to him. He stands up and holds his side, blood turning his right hand red. The 3 hold the man down as Frank grabs the knife that was at the man's side and starts to stab into his neck. Daniel. No. He coughs as Mark and Jacob both move away and Frank keeps stabbing his neck. Frank. Fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. Mark watches Frank hack away at his neck before his head is completely severed, still wearing that plastic mask. Liam. Can you get me out? Daniel and Mark both turn to Liam, screaming for help. Mark. Fuck, this is so bad. Daniel looks at the knife in his leg. Daniel. That's not good. Frank. Shit, is it deep? Daniel turns to Frank and shrugs his shoulders. Jacob. Look, dude, we couldn't get him out before. Frank and Daniel both turn their heads to see if they can find the other man that attacked them. Mark. Looks like the other guy took off. Liam. Hey, this fucking trap. He cries out in pain when footsteps are heard running at them. Mark turns around to see Emma. Frank. Thanks for the fucking help. Emma. They could have fucking killed me. Frank. Yeah, no shit. We could have died. If you run away again, don't you dare think of coming back. Frank rips up some of his shirt to give to Daniel to stop the bleeding from his side. Mark. Wait a second. Take his mask off and I'll get it on the GoPro. Frank picks the man's head up and removes the mask. What's picked up on the video is shocking to say the least. The man's face looked like the skin on his face has been skinned off slowly over a few months. giving his face an almost burnt-like look, a shade of light reddish-brown. No hair anywhere on his face, nothing to identify. Frank. What the hell? People don't just look like that. Mark. Why not? If you passed him on the street, he would just look like someone that has been in an accident. Daniel looks at the face with concern. Daniel. In him was life, and that life was the darkness in mankind. Daniel closes his eyes for a moment. Emma. Can we leave now? Liam. Not without me, you aren't. Time 25.39. With a lot of effort, they free Liam's leg and Frank carries him, with the knife now out of Daniel's leg and pieces of shirt wrapped around to slow the bleeding. Footsteps can be heard all around them, but nothing is done in this time. Jacob. They are just letting us walk to mess with our heads. Frank. Yeah, these sick fucks must be enjoying it. How you holding up, Daniel? Daniel. Yeah, I'm... good. Mark looks around and hears sound, steps and sticks breaking. Emma. There is not a chance they let us leave, right? Mark. Well, we got one of them. Maybe we can fight them off. Jacob. At least only 2 of them jumped us, right? And 1 ran off for some reason. Emma. Yeah. Frank. So, tell us about your past, Emma. Before we all die, haha. Emma. You are annoying, but I was an escort. Frank. Your price is cheap? Emma. Too expensive for you. Everyone laughs. Daniel. Hey Liam, you still with us? Frank. Liam? They all stop for a moment to make sure he is still breathing. Frank. Shit, he passed out. Frank puts him down against a tree. Frank. My fucking arm is killing me. With no sound as a warning, an arrow pins Liam's head to the tree he is resting on. Everyone starts to look around to see where that arrow came from. Mark points his flashlight at one of the men holding a small bow. Mark. Shit, look at that fucker just standing there. Come here, you piece of shit. Daniel. Mark, stop. We got to just keep moving. The man takes aim and shots another arrow into Liam's head. Emma. He is playing with us. She runs to Frank and Daniel. Jacob. We have to leave now. Mark. Damn it. Mark follows behind them as they walk a bit faster. They walk until they come across a steep hill. Frank. God, I hate these woods. Before they start to walk up the hill, one of the men are only a few feet away from them to the left. He is holding a large knife and watching the group. Frank. Come on, I killed one of you already. He holds the knife up. Mark gets close to Frank as they are both in front of Emma, Jacob and Daniel now. Fast steps can be heard from behind the man coming down the hill. Emma. You guys hear something? Mia. Ah! Mia comes rushing behind the man with a rock flying down the hill. He turned to her just to see how he was going to die. Her body slams into his, pushing him violently to the ground. What? Said the whole group as they now watch Mia slam the rock into the man's mask, breaking it and caving his face into a brutal mess. She grunts and doesn't stop for a full minute. Frank. Hey, the dude is dead also. Where the fuck did you come from? Mia. Up from the hill. She points from behind her. I've been keeping close but far from those masked weirdos, Daniel. What? Why? You could have helped us earlier. The group look at each other and at Mia as she starts to walk up the hill. Mia. We should get going up here. Frank. Answer Daniel. You have been close and not helping until now. They all start to follow her up the hill. Mia. Yes, I'm looking out for myself. Not taking any chances, Frank. That's so fucked up. But I understand. Time 39:23, Frank. That hill sucked. They get to the top and rest for a moment. Daniel. Oh, come on. Everyone look. He points down the hill. The 3 remaining men are at the bottom of the hill, looking up to the group. Frank. Look at that big cunt. He spits. Mark falls to the ground and just sits there looking at others. Jacob catches his breath and stands near Mia. Mia. Yeah, just keep an eye on them. We'll make a run for it if they start walking up here. Emma walks to Mia. Mark. So Daniel, have you put more thought into what Liam said? Daniel. Yeah. Frank. And? Daniel takes a deep breath and sighs. Daniel. I don't think she has anything to do with this. I can't see her doing something this horrible. Mark. Okay, I guess it doesn't matter right now anyway. But can you tell us about what happened with her husband? Daniel. Sure. He left her for her younger sister. She is a successful doctor, attractive and smart. Margaret has always had something against her sister, thinking she had it easier. That doesn't mean she would do anything like this to people she is trying to help. Frank, maybe she needed help. There's a moment of silence, Frank. Anyway, looks like they aren't moving for as long as we are looking at them. Another game, I'm sure, Daniel. Most likely. I just keep thinking if I could have helped a little more. Frank. Dude, there's nothing else we could have done. It's just fucked, that's all. Daniel. Well, maybe we should have all attacked them the moment they arrived. Better chance of killing them, maybe. There is no way we can take them all on now with how we are. Frank. Killing them? You sound different from before. Daniel. They are monsters. Frank. Worse, they are man. Daniel. Frank. I hope you can move from your anger. God will forgive you. Frank said nothing and just looked at Daniel. Frank. So, think there's an afterlife? Daniel. Yeah. Frank. I hope so. Frank sighed and grabbed Daniel, pushing him. Daniel. What are you doing? Frank. Everyone run. Frank jumps down the hill towards the men. Mark stands up and looks at the girls and back to Daniel. Mark. Shit, he just took off. Daniel. We gotta go, he's giving us time. Mark helps Daniel move as fast as he can. Emma and Mia ran, but not too far ahead. Jacob. Shit. I can't keep running. Jacob can barely run at this point, Daniel. Mark. Go help Jacob. I'll be fine. Mark nods and runs to Jacob to help. Mark. I got you, man. But we gotta move as fast as you can. Mark puts an arm around Jacob. Jacob. I'm so sorry, he says while panting heavily. Emma and Mia are far ahead of the group. Mark helping Jacob and Daniel being close to them. The woods are dark and thick with trees. The sounds of bugs and animals can be heard faintly. Time, 48:21. Mia, hurry up. She shouts at the three that are now far behind. Mark, they are gonna leave us at this rate. Jacob, you and Daniel really should leave me. Daniel, not happening. He moves closer to them. Jacob, I'm slowing you guys down. The girls are so far and we shouldn't be split up like this. He moves Mark's arm and gives him a little push. Mark, we still aren't leaving you. They start to jog a little. Emma and Mia come back to the group. Mia, if you want to live, maybe run faster. Emma, we can't let them catch up to us or find out where we are. Jacob, maybe we should all split up and run in a different direction to the others. Emma, that's not a bad idea. Daniel, no, we just need to keep, He falls to the ground and grabs his leg. Mark, shit, dude, you've lost a lot of blood. Daniel, I'm good. He stands back up and grunts. Mark, Mia, can you help, please? Mia, no. Emma sighs and walks to Daniel, helping him move. Daniel, thank you, Emma. They start moving again. Mark, hey, Jacob, if it's okay to ask, but how did you get that scar? Jacob, well, I got it in a car accident. One night coming home from drinking a lot. He puts his finger on his eye and runs it down to his neck. Got this, survived, and stopped drinking from that day on. Mark, and what about you, Mia? Got anything you want to get off your mind? She turns her head to Mark and back. Jacob, guess not, haha. Daniel sighs and whispers something to Emma, but it can't be heard. Emma leaves Daniel and steps quickly towards Mia. Jacob, we still can split up. Make it hard for those crazy people. Daniel, it seems like they know these woods. I don't think it would really do anything, Mark. Yeah? They are probably not too far behind us. Jacob, or maybe Frank killed them all for us. Daniel stops for a second but keeps walking. Daniel, he didn't have to do that, but I hope he managed to get away from them. Jacob, yeah, I would have liked to hear the rest of that scary story. The three share a quiet laugh. Mark turns his head to the left to see nothing and to the right. He stops and Jacob looks at him. Daniel, you too? He stops and turns to Mark. Mark. There. He points into the woods and a white mass can be seen. Mark turns his flashlight on and sure enough, The man with the bow can be seen about 20 feet away or so. Jacob. Oh, fuck off. Daniel. I guess they have been following us this whole time. He takes a deep breath and sighs. The two girls now come walking back to the group. Mia. You guys want to stop every 2 damn seconds. Emma. Yeah, come on. They both look in the same direction. Mia. Shit. Well, are we just going to keep looking at him or what? Mark. Wait, if there's one there. Mark starts to look around and the other very tall man can be seen from about 20 feet behind them. Mark. Well, that's 2. Mark turns to both masked men one at a time. Daniel. They aren't moving. But shouldn't there be a third? Mia. Frank might have got one of them. Jacob. Or he got away and he is getting followed by the third one. Mark. Enough running. Mia. Are you serious? Mark. With only 2 left, yeah. Daniel. I'm still bleeding out, so I don't know how much I can help. He coughs. Jacob. Yeah, I'm in. Emma quietly gets close to Mia. Mark. Come here. Mark waves his hands at the 2 masked men. The one with the bow starts to walk over to the group. Mark. Get ready, everyone. The group moves closely together. The man now about 6 or 7 feet away. He tosses his bow and 1 arrow to the group. Mark dashes to the bow and arrow, picking them up and taking aim. Mark releases the arrow and doesn't come close to hitting the man. Everyone yells at him, Mark, damn! The man reaches his hand out as if Mark would nicely place it, but in his hand. Mark tosses it back to him. As the group backs up a little, the other masked man can no longer be seen. Mia. If he comes any closer, we jump him and follow me. The man puts his left arm behind his back, then in front of his face, and repeats this motion 2 more times. He shrugs and puts the bow around his torso and pulls a knife from his back. Jacob. Let's just rush him now. He turns to Mark. Mia. Fuck it. She runs to the man, followed by Mark and Jacob behind him. The sound of someone behind them falling over can be heard. Emma. I got you, Daniel. Mark is in front of the man, Jacob on his left and Mia on his right. He swings his knife left and right as he takes steps towards Mark. Jacob moves in and gets his right arm cut. Jacob. Shit. Jacob wraps his arms around the man's waist. Mia and Mark rush in as Mark tries to grab the hand with the knife, but a few stabs quickly hit Jacob's back. They push him and get him to the ground with Jacob now on top of him. Grunts from the man can be heard as he gets a few more stabs into Jacob. Mark. I got his arm. Mark holds the arm with the knife as Mia starts punching the man's face. Jacob starts bleeding from his neck onto the man. His left arm grabs Jacob's face. The GoPro can't pick it up, but Jacob yells in pain and covers his face with his hands. The man thrashes around, and with Jacob falling towards Mia, she moves for only seconds, but he gets free. He overpowers Mark and gets on top of him. The GoPro now looking up to the man as he raises his hand up, and just before he can slam it down, Daniel tackles the man. Emma helps Mark up, and they see the struggle between Daniel and the man. Mia gets to them before Mark, helping get the knife off him as Mia starts to stab the man. Daniel stumbles off the man as Mia stabs away at his neck, face and torso. He grunts as he gets stabbed, and soft moans can be heard. Mia. Let's see what he has on him. She pants as she looks in the pockets of his jacket and pants. Mark. Daniel, thank you. Mark helps him up as he coughs. Daniel nods, and Mark looks at Mia as she pulls a wallet from his jacket pocket. Mia. What? She throws money from the wallet, and it's just Monopoly money. She empties the wallet, and nothing else is in it. Mark. That's just... I don't even know what to say to that. Mia looks at Mark and over to Jacob. Sounds of flesh can be heard getting hacked at. Mark turns around, and so do the others. No, yells Mark and Daniel. The tall man chopping into his lifeless body with the machete. The tall man is now looking at the group. Breathing heavily over Jacob's body, he takes 1 step towards the group, and Mark flinches. The tall man pulls his arm back and throws the machete. The sound of it hitting something can be heard. Mark turns around to see Emma with the machete in her head and her body twitching on the ground. Mia runs towards him with knife in hand. The tall man grabs Mia, and with 1 hand around her neck, he lifts her up from the ground. She swings the knife, cutting his arm and chest before he grabs her hand with the knife. Daniel rushes over, but he is kicked in the chest and falls to the ground. He rolls on the ground and moans faintly. Mark. Shit! Oh, this is so bad. Mark runs to Daniel and gets him up on his feet, the GoPro now seeing the tall man up close. He looks down at Mark as Mia can be heard gasping for air and kicking around. Mark, I'm so sorry, Mia. Getting Daniel up and helping him move. Daniel, we can't leave her. He coughs. Mark takes a few looks back to the tall man just watching them leave. Tank top now having blood on it and Mia dead at his feet. Clean 55-10 Daniel. Mark, stop. Just stop. Mark. No, we gotta keep going. We can't stop. Daniel trips over and Mark quickly tries to pick him up. Daniel. I've lost too much blood. Mark. You can keep going. I know it, Daniel, no. He gets up. You run, and you don't turn back. He points behind Mark. Mark. Daniel pushes Mark lightly. Daniel. Get out of here. Mark backs up and footsteps can be heard deep in the woods. Mark. I'll make sure I get out of here, Daniel. Please do. Daniel gives him a thumbs up and Mark starts to run in the other direction. The minutes that follow are of Mark panting heavily as he runs deeper into the woods. Time 59:99. The video ends. This all happened years ago. I'm okay now and back home safe and sound. But it took a long time to get here. And it will take even longer for me to feel normal again. Maybe I never will. It all started like your typical week away at summer camp. Okay, you kids are with me, the camp counselor said in a loud, friendly voice. From this moment on, the 8 of you are a group. The Buckeye Squad. He handed out red armbands which we would wear to distinguish ourselves from the other campers. We began to put them over our shirt sleeves, and I felt a moment of absurd pride. The Buckeye Squad looked formidable. We'd be a tough match for any other group I could see. It was the first day of sleepaway summer camp, and the counselors began showing us the bunks where we would be staying for the week. He opened up the squeaking door at the back of a large Pioneer-style wagon, and we all brought our bags inside and began to look around the sparse quarters for a few minutes, getting settled. Circle Wagon Ranch was the name of the camp, and it had an old Western theme with horses and trail rides, as well as archery, swimming, and a ton of other activities. Instead of cabins or tents, we would be sleeping in what looked like old frontier wagons. Each wagon could sleep 8 kids with 2 bunk beds per side. And they were really hot inside, I noticed. There were no windows and the only airflow was through the front door, which couldn't be propped open. It's like an oven in here, one of the other kids said before I could get the words out. It looked like we'd be spending most of our time outdoors that week, I thought to myself. We all rushed out of the wagon and back into the breeze. Suddenly, the sun above didn't feel so hot anymore. It was just nice to feel fresh air on my face. The cool wind coming in from the forest to the west was refreshing. Man, that's hot as hell. We're never going to be able to sleep in there, the kid next to me said. He was about my height, which meant he was tall for his age as well. He was wearing a red shirt and cargo shorts and was smiling at me in a friendly way. Yeah, hopefully it cools down overnight, I said. Hey, I'm Jason, by the way. No way. That's my name, too. I couldn't help but laugh. It was a common name, but still it felt pretty random to run into another Jason right away as soon as I'd arrived at summer camp. Aside from our names, we were near total opposites. I had blonde hair and he had black hair. His clothes were dark while mine were light and colorful. Later on, I'd wish I'd never met this other Jason, a bizarro version of myself, bent on chaos. But for now, it seemed as if we would be fast friends. He stuck out his hand and I shook it. Do you like pranks, Jason? He asked me in a sing-song voice. He had a look in his eye that worried me. One eyeball was gazing past me while the other stayed fixed on my face. I didn't know why at the time, but he made me feel unsettled. His tone was wrong, his smile just a little too wide. Yeah, who doesn't like pranks? I said nervously, looking around to see if there were any grown-ups nearby. There weren't. They'd all suddenly disappeared. Oh, you'd be surprised. Some people have no sense of humor. But I can tell you're a prankster like me. We're gonna have a fun week, Jason, he said, his teeth bared in what might have been mistaken for a smile. We're gonna have so much fun. Yeah, for sure. I'm looking forward to it too, I replied, shifting my eyes away from him. I sidestepped as casually as I could, moving over to try and make friends with another group of kids a moment later. But it seemed like I'd missed the boat. Everybody had paired up into groups of 2 or 3, and I was left with Jason. For the rest of the week, it would be just me and him. The next day, the other Jason started his pranks. They seemed harmless enough at first, and I'll admit I even went along with them in the beginning, if only because I didn't want to upset him. Besides, they were stupid, childish jokes at the start. Jason had all sorts of supplies he'd brought from home for these purposes, and I saw he had planned ahead to wreak havoc on the camp and all of its inhabitants. It started with little things, like putting salt in the camp counselor's sugar shaker in the mess hall. We watched the sour looks on their faces as they took sips of their morning brew and spit it out, standing up and looking around for the brats who had spoiled their breakfast. The two of us pretended we were casually eating and averted our eyes. Next, he showed me the fake spiders and snakes he'd brought with him from home, his duffel bag containing a large freezer bag full of them. He put them under counselors' pillows and in campers' shoes, and ran through the whole assortment of them as they were confiscated one by one. After those were all gone, he showed me the stink bombs and whoopee cushions, silly spray and thumbtacks he'd brought. He had cling wrap, which he stretched over the toilet, bowls so it would splash everywhere when people went to take a leak. Every time I thought he had run out of supplies, he'd amaze me with some new way to harass the other campers. By the time the week was halfway through, people knew there was someone causing all this chaos, but they still weren't sure who it was. I have to admit I felt a little giddy with the secret knowledge that I was in on all these little jokes, when even the other members of the Buckeye Squad had no idea. Sure, they were stupid, juvenile pranks. At least nobody was getting hurt, though, I told myself. At least not yet. But people were starting to get suspicious. Everyone had their guard up now, and it was getting tougher and tougher to get away with these little tricks and gags. We're going to get caught pretty soon, I told Jason one morning as we were standing outside the Buckeye wagon, waiting for breakfast to start. Maybe we should take a day off. Let the heat die down a bit. At this point, I was still having fun. I had no idea how bad things were going to get. True pranksters never take a day off. Jason, you should know that by now. He was holding his toothbrush and toothpaste in his hands innocently, and I was wondering what exactly he was going to do with them. His eyes had a twinkle in them which told me I would find out soon enough. Go knock on their door, he said, pointing to one of the other wagons. It was the green group called the Cowboys. What are you going to do? I asked suspiciously. Just do it, he told me, and the look in his eyes was serious and a little mean. I gulped and agreed, walking over to the wagon and knocking on the door. Meanwhile, Jason hid just outside, his back against the wall facing me, so that when the door opened it would swing to conceal him standing there, if it didn't smack him in the face. He waited and watched me closely with his back against the wall, his eyes wild and crazed. Hey, what's up? A sleepy-eyed camper said when he opened the door. It swung wide to camouflage the other Jason, who now hid behind it invisible. I was caught off guard. I hadn't thought of what I was going to say. Morning. Do you have a towel I can borrow? I lost mine. One sec, he said, stepping away. As I stood there, I couldn't help but wonder what Jason was up to behind the door a couple feet away. It was difficult to pretend with him standing right there. I felt sure we were going to get caught. The kid came back with a towel and I grabbed it and thanked him, telling him I'd be back with it. The door closed and the two of us snuck away from the wagon. Nobody had noticed what Jason did behind the open door, including me. 1 down, 2 to go, said Jason with an impish grin on his face. It began to occur to me what his ridiculous plan was, but it didn't seem particularly clever, aside from the way he was going about it. It was just another irritation, like the cling wrap and the salt and the sugar shakers. One more thing to set the rest of the campers against us, almost as if he wanted them to hate him, and to hate us. 10 minutes or so later, the fun started. At least what Jason thought of as fun. What the hell is this? Toothpaste? One kid yelled, his hands covered in bluish-white goo. Oh, what the? Another kid was shaking his hand off, flinging toothpaste everywhere. Jason had managed to coat the inside of each sleeper wagon's front door handle with toothpaste, so that when the campers grabbed the door handle to open it, toothpaste went everywhere, staining their shirt sleeves and pants. There was no running water except at the main building, so there was no way for them to clean their hands or clothing. Like I said before, it was not a particularly clever trick, but it worked nonetheless, and the campers were all furious. Not only that they'd been fooled by another prank, but that this one had been orchestrated in broad daylight right under their noses. They'd all been going in and out of the wagons all morning, so I couldn't help feeling like it was pretty devious and was more than a little worried we'd be caught. It looked like more than one camper had ruined an article of clothing or two with the mess, and suddenly I felt kind of bad for acting as the distraction. Someone from the Buckeye squad went into our wagon and yelled out in annoyance a moment later, and I realized Jason had done the same trick to our wagon, to cover our tracks. He'd rigged the door handle of every wagon, including ours. "Who's doing these stupid pranks?" yelled Brian, a blonde-haired kid with toothpaste all over his bright orange shirt. The hoodie looked expensive, with a name-brand design on the front, something my parents never would have been able to afford. Brian was popular among the other campers, and people immediately rallied around him. He had been to Circle Wagon Ranch every summer for years. Rumor had it that his family knew the owners of the place personally. "It's those Jason kids," someone replied, pointing in our direction. That one came to my door asking for a towel, then a few minutes later this happened. A group of them were surrounding us a second later like an angry mob, and Jason hastily objected. "Hey, wait! We didn't do anything. Look, our wagon got it too. If anything, it was the Lone Star gang. See, they didn't get pranked. It's obviously one of them." I was amazed to see the scheme had worked. By leaving the one wagon untouched, we had managed to divert all the attention toward them. The other campers hesitated and muttered back and forth to each other with uncertainty. "Yeah, I guess that's true. All right, maybe it wasn't you guys." All of them seemed to agree, except for Brian. He didn't look convinced. As the others began to move away, he stayed, watching us with knowing eyes. "You two think you're pretty clever, huh? Well, I'm not as stupid as all of them," he said under his breath. "I know you just did that to throw them off your trail. I know it's been you two doing this stupid bullshit all week. Well, I'm gonna catch you in the act next time and make sure you get kicked out of here. You ruined my best shirt with toothpaste, assholes. Now I'm gonna make sure you pay for it." He turned around and walked away, wiping his sticky blue hands on his already stained shirt. I knew from my own past experience nothing was getting that shit out. Jason laughed when he got out of earshot, putting his hand up for a high five. "Man, we got him. That worked like a charm." I gave him a weak high five and looked down at my shoes. I didn't feel like celebrating, I felt like throwing up. And once again I wished I'd made friends with anyone at camp except for the other Jason. The next day was hot and we all went for a hike down to the river to go for a swim. It took an hour to get there, marching through the forests and swatting at mosquitoes the whole time. When we found the water, I was surprised to see it was a crystal clear river surrounded by cliffs on one side and forest on the other. A few of us went off to climb the hills and try to find our way to the tops of the cliffs, while others stayed behind to swim. Jason and I had parted ways for a little while, and I had managed to join up with another small group who reluctantly took me in, despite the fact that I was from a different squad, since it was a day trip and there were no competitive activities planned. It was easier to mingle with the other kids that day, and I was thankful to have an excuse to get away from Jason. I climbed up to the peak of one of the cliffs with this group of kids and learned their names were Tom, Joe, and Brett. "What's up with that other guy you're always hanging around with?" Joe asked, as we hung our legs off the side of the cliff and looked down into the blue river water far below. "What do you mean? He's weird as hell, man. Brian thinks it's him who's been playing all the pranks on everyone. To be honest, we thought you were in on it. But now that I'm getting to know you, you seem decent enough." "I don't know," I said, hesitating. "He's weird. I didn't really want to be friends with him. We kinda ended up just hanging out together. I tried to find some other way to explain, but couldn't. He wasn't a good guy, I knew that. Maybe I just needed to be honest about it." I opened my mouth to say something else, I don't know exactly what, when the camp counselors called us back down to the swimming area. It was time to head back to camp. Jason was nowhere to be seen and was conspicuously absent every time I tried to locate him. It made me feel uneasy, like a wolf was lurking in the trees in the shadows where I couldn't observe him. But still, I was relieved that I didn't have to hang out with him for a little while. He was starting to get on my nerves. That night, Jason appeared beside me out of nowhere, as we were all sitting around the campfire singing songs. With the voices carrying high into the air all around us, he whispered something in my ear. "I found something out in the woods. You gotta check this out, dude." I didn't really want to go with him, but he wouldn't take no for an answer. He kept saying I just had to see this thing, I just had to. It was the most amazing thing he'd ever seen. At that point, I wasn't really thinking of him as dangerous yet. Just a little strange and eccentric, sure, but not dangerous. I thought maybe he'd found some hidden treasure or something. I was a kid, after all, and I didn't know any better. He seemed really excited about whatever it was, his face and clothes smeared with dirt and mud as if he'd been digging somewhere. Eventually I relented and snuck off with him into the forest. The songs of the singing campers receded into the distance behind us, gradually fading away until they were just a memory. But still we trudged deeper into the dark woods. Where are we going?
This is taking forever!
We're gonna get in trouble, I moaned, beginning to hope he would get tired of my belly aching and turn around as I kept insisting. But he stubbornly continued moving forward, ignoring me. I sidled up beside him to get a better look at his face and saw his eyes were gazing far ahead, almost as if he was in a trance. "Jason?" I asked him sharply. "Jason!"
He finally turned to look at me, and it seemed like I'd just woken him from a pleasant dream.
He was smiling faintly, his eyes half closed. "Are we getting close? I'm tired. I want to go back." Just then I heard a sound coming from the forest, just off the path. It sounded like a hurt animal. "We can't go back now. We're there. Don't you want to see?" he asked me, the smile on his face getting bigger. "Come on, I'll show you." He pulled my arm and led me over a ridge deeper into the trees. A shape could be seen up ahead, slumped behind the broad trunk of an oak. I realized as we got closer that it was moving, heaving up and down as if it were a person crying, "What is this?" I heard the words come out of my mouth, but they sounded as if they were coming from a great distance away. On numb legs, I drew closer to the body, stumbling through the leaves and mud. "It's Brian, or at least what's left of him," Jason said from behind me. I didn't realize until that moment I had been so preoccupied with looking for Jason during the hike earlier, I hadn't even noticed Brian's absence. He had been gone for the exact same length of time. Even the camp counselors hadn't noticed. As I circled around the tree to get a better look at his face, I saw why he was whimpering. Jason had done terrible things to the boy. He was barely hanging on to the last thread of life, breathing in shallow wheezes, blood dripping from the wounds which had been cut into his face and all over his body, making him nearly unrecognizable. His ears were gone, as were his lips and nose, eyelids, and fingernails. Both his legs were stacked like firewood in a heap nearby. "Aren't you happy?" Jason asked quietly, gazing at me with his one lopsided eye. I had never felt so terrified in all my life. "Now we can keep having fun. Nobody's gonna get in our way." "Why would you do this to him?" I asked, backing away. "Why the hell would you ever think I would want this?"
"You're a psychopath!"
"Stay away from me, you freak." His eyes darkened and his brows furrowed at that word, and suddenly he looked very angry. No longer the fun trickster Jason I had been friends with. Now he looked very much like someone who could do the terrible things I had just seen. "You don't mean that," he said quietly. "Say you didn't mean it. Say you're my friend. Say you want this. No, you're insane." I turned and tried to run and made it a few steps, but felt myself trip over a root a moment later. Falling over hard, I felt my jaw snap shut painfully as I hit the ground, and it hurt worse than any pain I'd ever felt. As I tried to scream but couldn't, all I could think was that it felt like my jaw was broken. Getting up slowly to my feet, I began to have a very bad feeling about what would happen next. I heard him rushing up behind me, the dead leaves crunching beneath his fast-moving feet. He was breathing fast and heavy, and he was roaring like a bear. Something hit me hard in the back of the head, and I fell down, collapsing on the ground. I remember tasting dirt between my teeth and on my tongue, and then everything went black. When I woke up, there was a bizarre scene happening all around me. The first thing I saw was that we were still in the forest. The other Jason was wrapped in a blanket and talking with several police officers. He was crying, his face red with tears, and he was pointing at me, saying something about how scared he was. "Sick freak," someone said. I turned to see it was Joe. He was standing with Tom and Brett, the three friends I had made when the other Jason wasn't around. "I can't believe you killed him," Brett spat. "Guy didn't do anything to you." My mind was racing, trying to figure out what the hell was going on, and then I realized he was pinning the whole thing on me. I tried to speak, but when I did, it felt like someone was driving a nail into my jaw. The pain was excruciating. Not knowing much about these things, I did remember when my uncle broke his jaw once and it had to be wired shut until it healed. He couldn't talk for weeks, and neither could I, attempting to overhear the conversation which Jason was having. I felt my heart begin to pound even faster. He kept pushing it further and further, the other Jason said. I thought it was just supposed to be little pranks, that's what he said at first. But things kept escalating. He brought all this stuff from home. Fake spiders, fireworks, cling wrap. I thought it seemed harmless enough. But now this? If I'd known what he was going to do, you have to believe me, I would have told you guys. He was crying, putting on such a good show for the grown-ups. I almost believed it myself, except I knew what he had done. I'd seen it myself. Where's Brian? I tried to scream. He tried to kill him. He tried to kill me. But no sound came out except for a muffled clicking and my strangled scream afterwards. The pain of trying to talk was horrifying. Shut up, freak, the cop said to me with no sympathy. Then he looked back to the other Jason. Almost done, kid. You're doing great. Just one more thing. What about his face? Did you see him do that to himself? I felt it then at the corners of my mouth. A pain which I hadn't noticed before. A terrible searing agony. The fractured jaw had outweighed it sufficiently that I hadn't felt it until that moment. But it was exquisite. Indifferent from the other pain. I had been cut with a knife blade on the corners of my mouth on both sides, upwards, like a joker's smile. He just said he thought the pranks were so funny he needed to laugh about it more. He wanted to keep laughing forever, Jason said. Geez, the cop replied, shaking his head. Well, you did a good job reporting this to the adults. Now, do you have any questions for me? The other Jason thought about this for a moment before asking his next question carefully. Will he be allowed visitors? In prison, I mean. You want to visit the accused? The cop asked suspiciously. Jason grinned, his one eye looking at me while the other looked at the police officer. Of course. We're best friends. You know what they say. Best friends are forever, even if they are a little crazy. The fire crackled softly as we sat in a circle, the darkness of the forest pressing in around us. I glanced at my friends, their faces illuminated by the flickering flames. It was our annual camping trip, a tradition we had kept since high school. This year we had chosen a remote spot deep in the woods far from the nearest town. Everything had been going smoothly until that night. Do you guys remember what happened? Sarah asked, her voice tinged with unease. I frowned, trying to piece together the fragmented memories. I remembered the fire, the laughter, and the drinking. But after that, things got hazy. We were telling ghost stories, right? I said, hoping someone could fill in the blanks. Yeah, Mark replied, but he didn't sound sure. We were, but then, I don't know. It's like I blacked out or something. Tom, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. I remember, he said, his voice low. There was something in the woods. My heart skipped a beat, a cold wave of dread washing over me. Flashes of the night surged back into my mind. Shadowy figures slipping between the ancient trees, their movements fluid and unnatural. The wind carried faint, haunting whispers that seemed to come from all directions, speaking in a language I couldn't understand. An overwhelming sense of dread had settled over me like a suffocating shroud, making it hard to breathe. Each memory felt surreal, like fragments of a terrible dream that couldn't possibly be real. Yet the fear they evoked was all too tangible. What did we see? I asked, my mouth dry. Tom's eyes darted to the dark woods surrounding us. I know the feeling it gave me. Sarah shivered, pulling her jacket tighter around her. I thought it was just a nightmare. A nightmare we all had in unison? I don't think so, Tom insisted, his voice trembling. A silence fell over us, the only sounds the crackling fire and the distant rustling of leaves. The fear in our eyes was unmistakable, but there was something else. Confusion. Like our memories were fragmented pieces of a puzzle that didn't quite fit together. Wait, Mark said suddenly. Didn't we run? I remember running through the woods trying to get away. I remember that too, I said, the memory surfacing. Branches whipped against my face, the ground uneven beneath my feet, the sensation of being chased. But we didn't all run, Sarah said, her voice trembling. Some of us stayed behind. A cold chill ran down my spine. What do you mean? Sarah's eyes filled with tears. I saw you, Jack. You were standing by the fire talking to it, like you were in a trance. That's not possible, I said, shaking my head. I was with you guys. We all ran together. Tom's face went pale. No, she's right. I remember that too. You were saying something to it. Panic surged through me. But that's not what happened, I insisted. I was with you guys. Then how do we all remember it differently? Mark asked, his voice barely above a whisper. We sat in stunned silence, the fire casting eerie shadows around us. I could feel the weight of the conflicting memories pressing down on me. each one as real as the other but impossible to reconcile. Suddenly, a twig snapped in the darkness. We all froze, our eyes darting to the edge of the firelight. A figure stood just beyond the reach of the flames, tall and unnaturally thin. The details were obscured by the shadows, but there was something familiar about its posture, its presence. "It's back," Tom whispered, his voice trembling. "Who? Who's back?" Sarah responded. I don't know," I replied, my voice barely a whisper. Sarah clutched my arm. "We need to leave. Now." Before we could react, the figure emerged from the shadows and stepped into the flickering light of the fire, revealing a face that sent a chill down my spine. It was me, or at least it looked like me, but there was something off. Something inherently wrong about the way it moved and the expression etched on its features. Its eyes, once mirrors of my own, now glinted with an unsettling darkness, devoid of any trace of humanity. They locked onto mine with a predatory intensity, and a sickening smile spread across its lips, a twisted, malevolent grin that sent a shiver down my spine. The resemblance was uncanny, yet there was an undeniable aura of menace emanating from this doppelganger, as if it were a distorted reflection of my worst fears and darkest desires come to life. "Some of us remember," it said, its voice a chilling echo of my own. "Some of us don't." My friend screamed, the sound piercing the night, but I couldn't move, couldn't speak. The creature lunged forward and the world went black. When I opened my eyes, I was back by the fire. My friends were gone, the forest eerily silent. The memories of what happened, of what was real, swirled in my mind, indistinguishable from each other. I was alone, but I could feel eyes watching me from the darkness. As I stood up, disoriented, I saw movement at the edge of the clearing. My friends emerged from the shadows, looking as confused and terrified as I felt. "What happened?" Mark asked, his voice shaky. We quickly gathered our things, the sense of urgency palpable. As we packed up, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still out there, watching us, waiting. We navigated through the dense woods, the path a barely discernible ribbon in the dim light of dawn. The forest seemed alive, closing in around us with an oppressive, almost sentient presence. Tall, gnarled trees whispered secrets we couldn't understand, their leaves rustling with a language of their own. Every snap of a twig underfoot, every rustle of leaves overhead, sent jolts of panic through us, our nerves frayed and on edge. The sky slowly lightened, casting a ghostly pallor over the landscape, and our hearts leaped with relief as we finally glimpsed the edge of the woods. The sight of our cars, silent and waiting like sentinels, brought a rush of hope. We didn't waste a moment. Throwing our gear into the trunks with frantic, fumbling hands, our only thought to put as much distance between us and that cursed campsite as possible. The forest's grip seemed to loosen as we sped away, but the unease clung to us, a shadow of the night we couldn't escape. As we drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. For a moment, I saw the tall figure standing at the edge of the woods, watching us with an unnerving stillness. Then it was gone, swallowed by the shadows. We didn't speak much on the drive back. The silence was heavy, each of us lost in our thoughts. When we finally parted ways, promising to keep in touch, I knew things would never be the same. That night, as I lay in bed, the events of the past 2 days replayed in my mind. Just as I was drifting off to sleep, I heard a faint knock at my window. My heart pounded as I turned to look, and there, standing outside, was the doppelganger, its expression blank, its eyes empty. It smiled, a twisted reflection of my own face, and mouthed the words, "Some of us remember." What did I stumble upon? What does it want from me? How does one comprehend the impossible? The truly impossible, but I suppose this would be the improbable as this happened to me. This all happened a few weeks ago. I was living a perfectly boring life, but after that day I can't even leave the house. I see it racing around my mind, but the image so clear, like it's standing there in front of me. I feel myself trapped in the moment, tortured by the memories that haunt me. I'm writing this as a warning, and in case nobody ever hears from me again, to act as a recant of what happened. Don't go into the woods. It was a regular Tuesday afternoon at the supermarket where I work. Stood behind the register scanning people's stuff-glazed look in my eye, just waiting for something to happen, until my best friend, out of respect for their families for the purpose of this story, I will be calling all my friends by their first initial. T calls me out of the blue and asks if I can take the next few days off from work to come camping with him and some friends. I have some vacation days saved up, so I say I'll check with my manager. It wasn't unusual for T to call me up randomly. He's the free-spirited, rock climbing, hiking, surfboarding, frickin' paragliding type that always has something they want to get you into. But as far as most of the things he's tried to get me into, camping's pretty tame. Of course, there was going to be a something else to it. T wasn't the type to do something so relaxing. But at the time, I didn't care. I just wanted a few days to hang out with my friends, drink some beers, have some BBQs, and just chill. If only I knew what I was in for. The place we arrived at was Kalachopko Lake. Apparently T discovered it on his most recent hike into the mountains. It was a beautiful place. The water was crystal clear, you could see all the way to the bottom. The spruce trees that surrounded us were so thick that we were completely secluded. You could barely see 10 feet into the forest. A perfect place to relax for a few days. This was not a well-established trail. We were pretty off the beaten path, but still only around 3 miles from the road we came here on and left the cars. I don't know how more people don't know about the place. We are completely alone. The other 3 friends that came with me and T are E, J and T's girlfriend L. I've known E and J since high school, but I've known T since I was a baby. We grew up across the road from each other and have been best friends since birth. But L I had only met twice, once at a party T and L were throwing as a meet my new girl thing, and the other was today. That being said, we all got on well. The first day was mainly just spent setting up camp, getting a fire pit established and getting the food hung up in a tree away from camp. I was told by T and E that there were bears out here. I didn't know if they were messing with me, but I wasn't taking any chances. I'm just glad I brought my rifle with me. I was hoping to catch a deer while we were out here. While we were setting up E and J's tent, they weren't a couple, but we only had 3 tents and nobody wanted to bunk with me because I have insomnia and keep them awake. Something felt weird, but I couldn't quite put my finger on what was wrong. It wasn't anything inherently wrong, it was just odd. And I wasn't the only one that had noticed it. He had to. He didn't say anything, but I could see on his face he had noticed it too. After we got the tents up, we all sat around the fire drinking a couple of beers, and we had some sandwiches prepped by Elle before we left, so we didn't have to make food on the first night. She was nice like that, as I had been repeatedly told by T. We exchanged funny stories, like the time J bet T he couldn't climb to the top of a lamppost and he fell, ended up falling onto J, and J remarked that the fire reminded him of E's ginger hair flowing in the wind. We all laughed. I still remember the sound of them laughing, but it was followed by the most horrific shriek ever. The sound was like no sound I have ever heard. It was like a child was being ripped limb from limb. Only the sound seemed to come from everywhere, all around us in every direction. Needless to say, we all hurried to bed pretty quick after that. I sat in my tent all alone, rifle in hand, all night listening. Looking for shadows. Nothing much happened, though. As we woke the next morning, it was clear none of us had slept very much, if at all. The air was thick with fog and the fire had burned right down to the embers. We got the fire going again and sat around the fire. Nobody wanted to be the first to speak up about last night, so we all just sat there in silence until T decided to be the one to speak. What the hell was that last night? One by one they all jumped in. It must have been a mountain lion. They make a sound like that. What if someone was hurt last night? All good theories, but that's all they were. Elle tried to change the subject with breakfast. We all sort of agreed that we should. I think it was more to put our minds off it than actual hunger. We all headed out of camp to the tree where we hung the food, only to discover the remains of what used to be our food. The ground was littered with empty meat packets, burgers, steaks, ribs, all gone, but nothing else. T said it must have been a bear, and I said, if it was a bear, they would have eaten everything, not just the meat, and even if they had, why hadn't any of the other scavengers come to eat what's left? That's when it hit me what was wrong with this place, what was making the hair stand up on the back of my neck the other day. It was the sound. There wasn't any. No insect sound, no bird song, nothing, just the noise of the trees blowing in the wind. We beelined it back to camp as quickly as possible, the safety of our camp. What felt like an impenetrable fortress compared to being out in the forest. The day progressed onward. We were all frightened and ready to go home. We all collectively agreed to leave this afternoon, so we started tearing down camp. We were almost ready to go when we hear the sound of E screaming for help, but we all turn around to see where it was coming from, and Jay said he just went into the wood to take a leak before we left. We all run into the woods, me armed with my rifle, T with a pistol he bought to fend off bears. It wasn't until we got deeper into the forest that we realized that the scream was almost monotone. like there was no emotion behind the screams of what seemed like excruciating pain. At this point, the sun was starting to set, and through the thick tree canopy it looked like night. We kept walking through the forest, but we never seemed to get any closer. It had been going on for around 20 minutes at this point. No matter how much we walked, we never got any closer to the source of the noise. We all eventually came to a clearing in the forest. There was something familiar about it, the trees, the lake. It was our camp. Well, since we cleared everything, it was just a clearing now with a fire pit in the center. How did the screams lead us back to where we started, and more importantly, why? I approached the fire pit and its old burnt-out coals. As I kneeled by it, there was something I caught in the corner of my eye. It was E's body dangling, but not hung from a tree. He was being held by his feet by that impossible thing. E's body was torn to shreds. He had large gashes down his front. The blood that oozed from the gashes was the deepest color of red I had ever seen. It turned his ginger hair a dark shade of orange. He died screaming in pain, the expression etched into his face. I ended up writing much more than I intended, so I'm going to release it in 2 parts. There is nothing to do in my town. If the internet had never been invented, I would have gotten stuck hanging out at the local coffee shop, desperate to fill my time. I have access to unlimited entertainment and information at my fingertips, and yet I still can't find answers about what happened last summer. I'm more of an indoor person. Somehow my friend Kenny dragged me along on a camping trip with his brother and my childhood friend. We all grew up together. Kenny's brother was 2 years older, so it felt like we never really connected. I didn't dislike him. We just didn't have anything in common. My best friend was the prettiest girl in the country, and I think she knew it. I had been in love with her since we were 13, but I'd never admitted it to her. I know the movement I did, our relationship would change. I was scared she might reject my feelings or accept them. Just being friends suits me just fine. The only way to get me outside was if Mila was going to be there. I think Kenny and Darren knew that. I refused to go on the camping trip. They asked Mila to come along, and they told me she would be with us. I hated how easily they played me. It was a hot day. All of us were sweating by the time we arrived at the campsite. "Can we set up the tents after?" Kenny said as he let all the bags drop from his shoulders. "No, let's get it done now, or else we won't get to it on time." I told him no matter how much I wanted to put it off, I knew him. The last trip he and his brother took, they were too lazy to set up the tents and just slept outside in their sleeping bags. They came home covered in bug bites. I didn't want a repeat of that. They both groaned and listened to me. Mila and I worked on one tent while the brothers set up the other. "There are only 2 tents, I pointed out. "We've shared tents before." She replied, not looking up. If she had, she would have seen how red my face got. At least I could blame the sunny weather for my flushed cheeks. Kenny decided to toss a full water bottle at Darren, but missed. It hit me upside the back of my head, and I needed to go over to them to roughhouse for a little bit. Mile crossed her arms, amused by us. I got my ass handed to me, like always. As I got back up off the ground from the play fight, I noticed something white flash between the trees. I was about to mention it, but the color was gone as fast as I noticed it. We had picked a campsite that wasn't that popular with the locals, but that didn't mean there wasn't anyone else in the woods. We finally got the campsite set up. Tents ready, food put away in case of any animals, and firewood gathered. Once that was all set, we started to head down the path that led to the lake. We all earned a long swim. Kenny and Darren walked ahead of us, and I helped Mila down the rough pathway. "Should we really be camping right now?" Mila asked loud enough for Kenny to hear. "Wasn't there a big search recently?" I heard a little about that. Kenny chimed in to explain what happened. 4 campers high on shrooms walked into the woods, and no one found any traces of them. "It was 3 weeks ago, so I don't think we'll come across a feral lost camper," he said with a shrug. It was a bit heartless to imply those 4 were dead. He was right, though. Those 4 didn't have a good chance of still being around after dealing with this summer heat for 3 weeks. Just in case, let's not go out in the woods alone tonight. I told them, suddenly feeling a chill even though I was sweating. "Is that your fetish? You like watching us pee?" Kenny teased. "I think he likes watching number 2. No free shows," Darren added. "Kinda weird how fast you guys thought of that. Almost like it was on your mind," I replied. "I've dealt with these guys for years. I expected the dumbest things to come out of their mouth." Mila giggled at us. I wondered why she put up with 3 morons. The lake wasn't as cool as I hoped. The water was nice, and it did help with the heat, but I almost wished I was at home with the AC on full blast. Whenever I saw Mila in her black one-piece swimsuit and swim trunks, the thought of Ak went out of my mind. I kept forcing my eyes away from her, so she didn't know how much of a creep I was. I really needed to get a grip on myself. "Hey, do you see that?" I asked Kenny when he swam over to me. He wrapped an arm around my neck to playfully drag me under, but stopped when I spoke. He followed my line of sight into the woods, trying to spot what I was staring at. "Is that a person?" he asked, squinting. Soon Darren and Mila were looking in the same direction. A white shape was between two trees on the other side of the lake. It did look like a person, but it was impossible to tell at that distance. It was too still to be a person, and yet it didn't sway in the breeze as if it was a discarded shirt or some trash. "Let's go and see," Kenny said as he let go of my neck. He started to swim away, and Mila came up next to me. "What do you think it is?" she asked. When I'd taken my eyes off the trees and to her, the white object moved. Kenny stopped swimming when he realized what we had been looking at was gone. Probably some old pervert watching a tasty little thing swim around shirtless, Kenny said with a splash. He's implying the old pervert is watching. "You," Darren finished with a smile. I slapped the water in his face. Soon the white shape had been forgotten about as we got into a water fight. I kept glancing back into the trees. The white shape didn't return, and I assumed it had been nothing after all. We started heading back to the campsite when the sky turned a slight orange. Kenny and Darren chanted the entire way back about the beans they were going to cook and eat. I was glad I was not sharing a tent with them tonight. When we did get back, they discovered that somehow they left the bag that held the coveted beans back in the truck. Mila also forgot her socks and a few other things, so she wanted to go back with them. I didn't feel like walking, so I volunteered to stay behind to get the fire started. They had been gone for at least 5 minutes when I heard Kenny's voice again, off in the distance. Oddly enough, it wasn't in the direction they left in. "Did you forget something?" I called out to him. His voice came again, but I couldn't make out the words. It was coming from the direction of the lake. But he would have needed to walk through the campsite to be on that path. I stood up, straining to listen. I called out his name and took a few steps closer to the pathway heading to the lake. "Kenny, stop fooling around!" I shouted, my voice echoing through the trees. Did he take the long way around just to scare me? No, he hadn't been gone that long for him to be that far out. I took another step closer but stopped. This felt wrong. After those 4 people got lost in these woods, I decided I didn't want to go down a path alone. I went back to setting up the fire and getting dinner ready. If Kenny was playing a prank, he would get bored and come back. Oddly enough, my 3 friends came back together. "Did you see any other cars around?" I asked them, wondering if there had just been another camper out here that sounded like Kenny. "No, it's just us." "Why?" Mila asked, catching on something was bothering me. "I heard something while you guys were gone. It sounded human, but it's hard to say." Now I was doubting myself. Did that really sound like a voice? Or was it too far away to tell? Probably a bird. Some of those loons or whatever they are sound spooky, Darren said with a shrug. He went out camping here pretty often. I accepted he knew what he was talking about and dismissed my concerns. We settled down to eat. The brothers gladly ate cans of beans as Mila and I stuck to hot dogs. The brothers also lit up an after-dinner treat. I didn't smoke, but Mila did on occasion. She passed that night. I think she didn't want to bring the smell into the shared tent. Kenny stood up to say he needed to use the washroom. It had gotten dark, so I found him a flashlight. I also needed to go. Then Darren stood up, deciding he should go with us. And Mila didn't want to be left alone, so we all gathered for a bathroom break. It was a bit hard to focus on the task at hand, knowing Mila was so close by. I knew she had her back turned to us 3 as we took care of business, and yet it still took me the longest to finish. We scouted a good spot for her and gave Mila some privacy, but also kept scanning the trees in case a wild animal decided to suddenly appear. With all that taken care of, we were going to head back when an unnatural sound came from nearby, something I never expected to ever hear while in a forest at night. A few feet away from us came the sound of a baby crying. I saw Kenny's pale face in the light of my flashlight. Darren silently shook his head as Mila stood frozen in place. I took a step closer to the source of the sound, and Darren's hand fell on my shoulder. "Fuck that," he whispered. I agreed and took a step back. We should all just leave. Mila, bless her, didn't want to risk someone actually being in trouble, She bravely marched off into the woods with 3 guys going after her, whispering for us to get out of there. We followed her to the source of the sound. She stopped just outside a small clearing with someone sitting on a log. They were dressed in rags with their back facing us. The figure hunched over, rocking back and forth as they made shushing sounds. We didn't hear the baby crying anymore. This was freaky. Downright nightmare fuel. Are you all right? Mila asked in a shaking voice. My baby. My poor baby. The woman spoke, and she sounded so normal compared to how she looked. We can call someone to get you some help, Mila offered. My poor baby is starving. Slowly the figure turned its head. The light caught a set of gray eyes that reflected in our flashlights. Stringy gray hair fell over a pale face. At first the expression was blank. Then the face transformed into something distorted and monstrous. Kenny and Darren were screaming before that creature stood up. They bolted, leaving Mila and me behind. I grabbed her wrist, forcing her to run as the pale creature screeched. It got on all fours to easily cross the clearing to reach us. It jumped into the air, mouth open and bony-clawed hands outwards. I pulled Mila out of the way in time. The monster crashed into a tree, then flipped around on the ground like a cat trying to right itself. We started running again. Mila's legs shook so much I ended up grabbing her around the waist to start dragging her. To my horror, the monster kept coming for us. I needed to fight back. I let go of her long enough to find a hefty stick to use as a weapon. That was a mistake, although I'm not sure if we had any chance of getting away unscathed. The pale creature came down on Mila, biting down hard on her hand. She screamed and kicked to get the thing away from her. I slammed the branch as hard as I could into the monster's face. It screeched and released my best friend. I kept hitting it, but I think I was just pissing it off. Just as it was about to go into a counterattack, a whistle came from somewhere. For some reason, the creature suddenly got on all fours, a look of distress on its face. It turned heel and darted back into the woods. To my horror, I saw another pale figure between the trees also take off running on all fours. I didn't care about the reason why they were leaving, only that we were safe for now. How bad is it? I asked Mila, turning all my attention to her. She shook her head with tears in her eyes. The bite wasn't as deep as I feared. We had a first aid kit back at camp. I took hold of her again to get us moving. I didn't hear Kenny or Darren. Even though they left us behind, I hoped they were safe. It'll be all right. We'll get out of here. Do you have your phone? I asked as we kept moving. Mila shook her head. I hadn't grabbed mine either. Sure, we were smart enough to go into a group, but we hadn't done anything intelligent after that. An odd whistling sound came through the trees. The strange melody chilled me to my core. Mila started to tug at my arm so we would walk away from the whistling. I glanced over her shoulder and saw flashes of white, darting around the branches above us. As much as I hated the whistling, going in that direction seemed like the better option. Mila protested a little when I pulled on her arm to get us moving. I didn't want to scare her by telling her about the creatures stalking us in the trees. When I heard Kenny scream, I forgot about the threats we faced and ran in his direction. Hearing his voice was a good sign. I just hoped we reached him in time. We stumbled into another clearing. I raised the flashlight I somehow still held on to. The beam of light landed on a stranger's face. His left eye reflected the light, but his right eye didn't. His head was slightly titled, as if amused by our sudden appearance. My skin crawled seeing such a pleased smile after the terrifying encounter beforehand. Kenny was on the ground, breathing heavily with the man's foot on his chest. My friend also had a bite taken out of his arm that was freely bleeding. For a moment it appeared he had a bolt from a crossbow sticking out of his chest. I soon realized the bolt was stuck inside a pale monster beside him. I didn't see it first. The stranger had a hunter's bow attached to his arm, loaded and ready to shoot. What did you do to Kenny, and where is Darren? I demanded with a trembling voice. The man licked his lips and lifted his foot off Kenny's chest. He brushed strands of dirty brown hair from his face only to have it fall back. I just saved this one from being a midnight snack, and I sent the other one down the trail. He might not reach the end of it alone, though, the stranger said, and ended his sentence with a raspy laugh. He sounded as if he smoked a pack a day for most of his life. I didn't trust this guy. Mila tightened her grip on my arm, showing she felt the same way. 2 of you got bitten tonight. Bites can turn people into those things. The infected ones won't be able to stand the whistling. After the man spoke, he started whistling in a way that didn't sound human. It was as if a songbird was trying to imitate a man-made instrument. I hadn't been bitten that night, and yet the noise put me on edge. Kenny recovered enough to scramble away from the stranger. Mila didn't react aside from appearing as nervous as she did when we first stumbled onto the scene. Finally, the man finished whistling and then studied us all very carefully. He raised the crossbow and rested it on his shoulder. The trail is just past those trees. You kids better get going home. A weight had been lifted off my chest. Aside from some minor injuries and a few scares, we were free to leave. Kenny was the first to get up. His legs shook as he tried to walk towards where we had been directed. Mila and I walked past the man, feeling his eyes on us. All the stress from the night came back as he gave us an unseen, judging stare. I thought we were in the clear when a sharp whistle came again. It was so sudden I jumped. Mila did as well. I turned around to comfort her, and what I saw caused my entire world to come crumbling down. Her face changed. The person I'd cared for so deeply and for so long looked nothing like herself. In her shock, she dropped her mask to let a contorted version of herself show through. When she realized her cover had been blown, her mouth grew wide and was suddenly filled with countless sharp teeth. She wanted to take my head off, but a quick shot from the crossbow stopped her. A bolt went through her cheek, shattering teeth. She screamed, thrashing around. Before the man shot her again, she ripped the bolt from her face and jumped backward. Mila landed on all fours, snarling with a bloody mouth towards us. To my horror, a ripping sound came as she sprouted massive bat-like wings. Her hands became claws and her face transformed into something so far from human that I almost doubted she had once been the friend I cared about. In a flash, she launched into the treetops, joining the other white creatures that watched the scene at a distance. It took me a long time to realize the stranger started to drag me away. My brain was so numb from shock I don't remember how long we walked on the trail or what anyone said to me most of the way back. I knew that man was whistling again. I snapped, wanting the noise to end. He stopped for a few minutes, then I realized the noise was the only thing keeping those creatures away. He playfully started back up again as Kenny and I kept our heads forward, trying to ignore the horrors in the trees. Darren was waiting for us at the end of the trail and outside of the forest. A lone police officer stood next to him, face as cold as steel. We stopped in front of them, unsure of what to say or how to explain ourselves. "Did you take care of the problem?" the officer asked, almost sounding annoyed. "Problems, and nope. Too many of them to deal with and get these three out at the same time. I'm going back in to see what I can do. Sure do wish I had a friend coming with me," the stranger said with a loud, over-exaggerated sigh. I found my mouth opening to offer to go back to try and save Mila, but the cop stopped me. He saw 3 scared kids who would die if they tried to fight some monsters in a dark forest. "None of that. This is your job, not theirs. Now go and do it while I take care of my duties." The man shrugged again and pulled something out of his pocket. I expected it to be a pack of cigarettes, but he opened a small jar of dried cinnamon sticks. He tried offering one to Kenny, who refused. I reached out to take one, not to start chewing on like he did. But I needed something real from that night or else my brain wouldn't believe what happened. "This one is bitten. Do you have anything for him?" the officer asked, and the stranger shook his head. Without warning, the cop pulled out a packaged syringe with some sort of clear mystery liquid inside. Kenny didn't protest the shot. The officer then reached into his back pocket to pull out 3 folded pieces of paper. "Sign these statements. The story is your friend got up in the middle of the night and got lost. We'll search for her tomorrow," the cop said and handed us a sheet of paper. Darren looked disgusted, but he signed his name. Kenny needed some prodding to do the same. I refused, and it made the officer glare daggers in my direction. What if I tell a different story? I threatened, ready to face whatever retaliation that might happen. "You can. I say it would be best for you mentally to get the real story out, but no one will believe you. As it is, people are going to assume you 3 did something to that girl. Don't make it harder on yourself," the stranger said as he rolled the cinnamon around between his teeth. I hated him. I hated myself, and I hated what happened. I signed the paper, and the officer told us to get inside his car so he could take us to the station. He made us repeat the same fake story a few dozen times. As we drove off, I looked out the back window to see the stranger giving us a sarcastic wave, and I saw the lights of the car being reflected by so many eyes watching in the trees. There was a search for Mila, but nothing turned up. People have whispered about what happened. None of it is even close to the truth. Kenny and Darren started to stay inside and away from accusing stares. I've heard they're not as close as they were before. I've started saving up as much as I can to move away. There's nothing left for me in this place aside from bad memories. I don't know if that man hunted down all the monsters lurking in the woods and deep down. I hope he didn't kill the thing Mila turned into, twisted or not. I wanted a part of her to live on no matter how selfish it was. I need to leave this place. I found myself wanting to go back to those woods to try to find her, and that desire scared me. The real Mila would want me to live, and that is what I'm going to try to do.